Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in TradFi, digital assets, technology, and financial planning. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk this afternoon, we have Karthik Swarnam. He's Chief Security and Trust Officer, ArmorCode, Inc., as well as a former Vice President of Security, AT&T, former CISO at Kroger, DirectTV, and TransUnion. We also have Vivek Kumar, Global Deputy Chief Information Security Officer at Cboe. He's a strong advocate with experience managing large global security operations to mitigate security threats and improve security postures of enterprises. We're here today to discuss enterprise risk management and AI. We know the world is getting digitized at an unprecedented rate, and today every company is a software company, whether you're looking at Google, Coca-Cola, Caterpillar, or even a smaller retailer. This increased reliance on software also increases the threat of cyber attacks. The latest developments in artificial intelligence have dramatically increased both the challenges and possible solutions to these attacks. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. And even with the level of sophistication and the type of technical capabilities we have developed in the world of cyber and AI, we still seem to struggle with mitigating risks. Why are enterprises still at risk?
Thanks for having me, Jill. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, we saw a massive increase in terms of security threats and risks in the later part of 2023, right? When you talk about cyber risks, it's multifaceted. It's human elements involved, you know, infrastructure, network, data, system, software, right? It's a multitude of things that's going on. And at the end of the day, you know, I think organizations are looking at more from a vulnerability and a risk perspective. I think organizations should start to take a step back and think about it from what are the consequences, resulting consequences and the impacts. That would help you focus and drive where you need to think about it, right? So is it a fraud? Is it, you know, are you able to deliver a service, right? So those are some of those things to think about, right? Plus, companies are struggling and actually drowning in tens of thousands of vulnerabilities and weaknesses in their systems, right? To compound this problem is then we're now adding generative AI. You know, it's got both good and bad associated with it. As a security practitioner, there's a lot of benefits that come out of it. Yet at the same time, there's a lot of challenges that come along with it too, right? It's kind of thrown in what I would call from an AI perspective, an unintentional insider threat problem, right? Because the data could be exposed and things like that by just leveraging it, not putting the proper guardrail. So as the adoption and the evolution of technology we saw in the last year, you know, companies are trying to figure out where do you need to go ahead and plug your holes, right? So that's the biggest challenge, I think.
Yeah. You know? And Vivek, why do enterprises need to get ahead of these challenges? I mean, the impact across, you know, the board to the business is huge.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's really a pleasure. And one of the biggest thing is, I don't know if you remember when the cloud came in, right? Nobody had a clue, and don't judge by age, when the cloud was here, and nobody knew that what we have to do with the cloud. It was very ambiguous. People didn't know that if my data is secure or not, but everybody wanted to hop onto the cloud. I see the similar trend happening with the generative AI and this AI thing in there. We call it a modern AI because AI has been there for a very long time, but it is like a modern this year when ChatGPT, LLMs, and generative AI came in. It's a different phase now. And management should take a concrete step using the Gen AI with ethical compass guiding us, because the generative AI which has emerged has come up with a lot of ethical concerns. It is crucial that we address them head on. It's bringing in risk like unfairness, bias and fairness, talking about misconfiguration and deepfakes, talking about privacies, talking about job displacement, consent, and what Karthik was talking about, the risk of losing the data, which is intellectual property, which is going out. So it's at the stage where people don't know what to do. It's a very vast and very big area. So they have to look into it very carefully to see how we can hop on it and how we can use it, because this is a wave which everybody has to ride. The only thing is that how you want to ride it, and you have to be prepared for it.
You know, I mean, one of the things is, you know, how do security practitioners start to see the forest from the trees, right? You're kind of, you know, all the way in the ground, right? And you're looking into a siloed aspect, right? So I think the problem needs a platform-centric approach, right? Can I collect and correlate, right? So you know, the philosophy of if you cannot measure, you cannot manage, right? Now we're measuring well. Now we need to find a way to how we transition from what I have measured to be able to manage it, right? Meaning, you know, okay, I have tens of thousands of stuff, but really what matters and where do I need to go fix what matters, right? So we have this philosophy of, I mean, at ArmorCode, we have a platform that kind of collects all of this stuff, puts it all together, and ability to be able to help you focus on your priorities, right? So that you're not looking at it from a technology, but more approaching it from a business function. Is it a point of sale system? Is it a call management system? Is it servicing a customer? Is it delivering the goods, right? Like, then you take it from that top-down business functional approach, then you can go down into those individual technology areas and start to kind of clean them up and fix them up, right? I think that's very important to think about as well.
Yeah, and there is a concern and fear amongst the people, right? And one of the things which we need to do is that we have to, as a cybersecurity professionals, we need to make sure that the business is involved in all these, decision making and discussion about adopting generative AI. We have to embrace it. It is there to stay, and we have to see how we can do it. It's something like you have a child, and instead of sending him to kindergarten, you are sending directly to the college. So there are a lot of steps which are missed in between, which corporate has to look into and make sure we are ready for it, right? And that's where a lot of people in corporate, what they are, enterprise have seen that they are jumping on it, thinking that it's a new toy I would like to play with. Especially the engineers, software engineers or developers, they love to have new toys in their toolbox. And as soon as it comes out, without thinking, because they don't think the security is their concern, they think that it's a new toy I can use to generate my codes and do a lot of things. And that's where the disconnect is.
And it's such a great point that the both of you bring up, that sometimes everyone's forced into their silos and they're not looking across the entire enterprise. Think about just in the past 5 years, let's call it, migration to multiple clouds, right? Where most of us are in an office environment or working in a hybrid environment. So that adds another layer on top of it. But I think when it comes to the cybersecurity role, particularly the role of the CISO, being able to communicate those needs across the enterprise and not be so siloed is critical. Because, especially as a publicly traded company, you're aware of this. If there is a cyber breach, you can't just shut everything down for 2 weeks and then revenue lines are shut down. It doesn't work like that. Investors care about these kinds of things. So the intangible impact, should you run into a big cybersecurity issue, and this is one of the things we speak about on the cyber panels, is effectively communicating CISO needs, and the risk part of it is essential when you're communicating to management and the board.
Well, and that's so true. The CISO plays a very vital role in cybersecurity organization. It's not one man's job. It's not only the CISOs are responsible or the security practitioners are responsible. They have to have a buy-in from the business. They have to educate the business how we can get in, what is the things we need to do, how we have to set up this whole environment, from which both of us we can benefit. It's a mutual benefit. It's a win-win situation we have to see. There are certain things which we can do to avoid this thing to happen and not work in silos, because working in silos in this kind of thing is very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of cybersecurity, the first thing that comes to mind, you mentioned technology function. It really is a risk management.
It is a risk
management.
It is.
Totally.
It definitely is. Let's talk about the risks of AI a little bit more here as it pertains to software security and how organizations can get a handle on this.
Yeah, so when you talk about software security and AI, right? And we have, actually in 2023 we saw only few percentage of using automated remediation, using coding assistance. But I think in 2024 and 2025 we will start to see adoption of auto remediation using coding assistance, which is a component of AI, generative AI, right? The risk, when you talk about risk, is risk in AI is very applicable to software as well, right? If you think about bias, if you think about vulnerable output, right? Like if based on how am I training the model, right? If I've trained the model and you're starting to use it, right, you're going to get vulnerable code coming out. Like, we're going to produce fast, but it's going to be vulnerable, right? Like mistakes happen, mistakes gets compounded, right? The other thing is also, one of the things that I've always think about is the effectiveness of a generative AI capability. The art is in the prompting, right? Like if you can do the right prompting, you would get the right outputs, right? Like, so malicious prompting is also a bigger concern, right? From a software development perspective, right? So when people talk about coding assistance and I can remediate fast, you have 10,000 vulnerabilities, I can go do fast, but you don't want to do fast with vulnerable output, right? So that's the biggest challenge, I think, from an AI perspective, right? Both bias, vulnerable output, and prompt injection or malicious prompt injection as it relates to code generation.
So to Karthik's point, who owns that responsibility, what generative AI is coming out of, right? Because if you model it on a fake data, on a wrong data, so the results which are coming out will be wrong, right, as you were talking about. And then who owns that responsibility that the results are coming out of generative AI is correct and acted upon? In one of the things which I see from the enterprise perspective and financial industry perspective is the intellectual property, right? A lot of people are trying to do, are we ready to put some of the key critical information, PII information, without knowing how and where it is going? And if you, as Karthik rightly said, you have to model this, you have to train generative AI based on certain set of data. And what are that certain set of data? How fake data you are giving, or how important data you are giving, and how generative AI is working on it and giving you the results based on that. So intellectual property is very, very important, where it's the biggest concern that your things are not going out in the market.
It almost feels as if there's this rush for Gen AI, whether you're doing local hackathons or to get a model onto your system. But to your point, the testing and the validity of the data is, I mean, that's just one component of it, never mind the cybersecurity threat.
Yep. I mean, companies have to have a very systemic approach, right? Having a multifaceted plan, right? Like, how do we start to roll out what kind of AI, what kind of uses, what the guardrails that I'll put into place? How do I know how I can restrict, large use of it, right? And then see, how do I validate what comes out of it, right? Like the output validation, it may be a sanity check, it may be a high level. It's not, we're not talking about a overly burdensome game, but having a structure, a systemic approach in anything that we do in life is always a good way to have a systemic, structured approach, right? And that's what is needed in AI as well.
So good point, and that's what the enterprise or the corporate should do. They should go with creating a controlled environment. Now, remember, generative AI is here to help human beings, to help us make decisions faster, right? They are not replacing us. So the inline decision making, the human component should be involved. For example, if you take a hospital, you don't want an AI tool to go and do an operation based on images he has, but you want to use it for administrative tasks and other tasks, and the decision making still is with human, with people. It's not completely replacing it. So in my opinion, that companies should take this and create a kind of an AI lab or kind of a separate environment and a separate set of data, as he's talking about the guardrails and controls. And we should say that, okay, you want to test it, establish a control lab environment, per se AI lab kind of thing, and use certain set of data, not the production data for it, and involve the business and the practitioners into it so that they have a buy-in.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Once you get the business for the buy-in there, and I think it also helped them understand that this is a process that needs to be taken place. Sometimes, if you're in a producer role, a sales role, a business role, you just want to be the first to market, and sometimes that can backfire on you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you can embrace it. Brace. It's more about, are you ready to brace a fall? You don't teach anybody to brace a fall, right? I mean, that's what you're looking for. What are those things to look for when you're, starting to use, right? It's not, as I said, these things doesn't have to be burdensome, right? It's just systemic controlled approaches to organizations as they adopt. Yeah.
Switching gears slightly here, you're coming from the background of being the company AT&T, DirectTV, TransUnion, Kroger. Now you are on the provider side. So you kind of have insight into, okay, this is what I need as someone procuring your products, and here I am providing it. What are some of the nuances? What have you learned from having been an acquirer and applying that to being a provider?
Yeah, so I think being an operator for a large enterprises, the more the controls and the things that to consider are multi-variety. It's not just technology, right? So how do you take a practitioner's point of view and say, hey, okay, this is what I want to do. We're a commercial entity. You don't have to be 5 years ahead. You want to be 18, 24 months ahead, right? So a pure science experiment or a technology innovation has to be coupled with the practical use and the realities of rubber meeting the road, right? I mean, that's very, very essential. How do I do it, right? So that's what I've learned from it, to move on into my provider side, to be able to say, how do we form fit these technology and tools that is much more practical in nature, that addresses the problem at hand, as opposed to a win on next new cool thing from a technology perspective. And that is such
a great point that you make, and Vivek, you can agree with this. Sometimes there's no problem to solve, so come to me with a problem that I can digest, that I understand this needs to be solved. So you work for a publicly traded capital markets company. We're heavily regulated. We get it. How do you make the decision in terms of how you're going to manage that tech stack? It feels like there's what is there? I think almost 7,000 cyber companies in the U.S.
The number goes by the minute, I think. Like right now, it's like 8,000.
7 or 8,000.
8,000 is the number that's being using it. Yeah.
I think it's a combined responsibility. It's not responsibility with one enterprise. And sorry to say, but Karthik, the vendors, the providers we are taking softwares from them or using their products and all, they play a very critical role in this. what they are providing. So as an enterprise, I should be able to ask them questions that, because everybody is selling the product, 8,000 plus people saying that there is an AI component to it. And what does that AI component means, right? It's such a large thing. And how we are secure. It's basically a shift in mindset, right? We have to have a big shift in mindset. And we have to see that how collectively you and I, like from a practitioner perspective and from a vendor perspective, I would say a partner perspective, not a vendor perspective.
It's got to be a partnership approach, right? I mean, if you're buying a product, I think that's the wrong start, right? Are you buying a partnership? Are you involved in a partnership? And then if you take a next step down, is this more of a platform that can look at holistically, solving a problem versus a feature or a widget or a product, right? So we need to be able to think through that, and then you can talk about it, and you can evolve everything, right? So absolutely, to your point, partnership is what matters.
And Karthik, I hate to say that vendor word because we are not buying a product. I believe personally that I'm buying a solution. And the solution, it comes with the product, the people, the spoke, and the technology behind it, right?
Well, because you have access to proprietary data on both ends.
Yes. And how do I know if I'm using a product and they are saying this is an AI chat box and you can go and put things in there and it will give you a result? It's so ambiguous, we don't even know. So it's very important for the partners also to educate us that what they are doing, how they are using the component, and how we will get benefit out of it, without thinking that just people will buy the product just because you have a generative AI component attached to it, which is not good.
All right, in the last couple minutes here, let's talk about 2024 outlook. Where do you think the focus is going to be from a cyber perspective, Vivek?
I think from the cyber perspective, we should evaluate the biases and risk and the risk to reward ratio to see that how do we measure it and where we go with it. It is a right which we have to, right? We can't avoid it. We have to embrace it. And we should embrace it with both the hands, but we should have a phased approach to this. And we should have, we should not jump to a conclusion and go and start using it, creating the control environment, creating the policies, creating the guardrails, because it's going to bite you later. So you have to be prepared now. And once you do that, having a structured approach, including the business into and partners into this program, this will be much more successful and win-win situation for all.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in my opinion, we're living in an exciting time right now. That said, we're still in cyber warfare constantly, right? And the adversarial tool capabilities and capacity to do more stuff keeps growing every day, every minute, every year. But for us in 2024, for the enterprises and the organizations and agencies to be able to defend, there are a lot of cyber combat capabilities, right? So I think we need to be able to pick and place the right capabilities and try to employ those pieces. I think we'll have a wonderful outcome from that perspective.
I just heard somewhere I was reading this morning, they said that somebody was awarded, a great singer awarded as a person of the year. They said instead of that, generative AI should be awarded as a product of the or person of the year, because that's how it is 2023, how AI has come forward.
And I will actually take the last word here, but because I feel like Gen AI, ChatGPT, whatever platform you're using, it's so consumer facing. The average person was not thinking about AI. I certainly wasn't thinking about it, for the course of my coverage. But now that it's consumer facing, this is about everyone, from personal to enterprise security. All right, gentlemen, amazing conversation. Thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me from MarketSite. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.